Well, hello, I'm Danielle Smith, guest hosting for Common Sense Calgary. This is our series of interviews with Calgary candidates for City Council. And today we've got Ward 14 candidate. It is Anton Ovtchinnikov. Anton, I hope I said your name correctly.
Close enough, yes.
Okay, you know what is nice is that you made it very easy for people to find you, and we'll post your website on our screen. It's just Anton for ward14.ca, so people won't have to remember how to spell your last name. So first of all, tell us a little bit about what brought you to wanting to run for Calgary City Council.
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you, Daniel. First, I want to say thank you very much for having me here. I've been following you for a while on your radio show. Especially enjoying your great conversations with people like Marcel Latouche from Institute of Public Sector Accountability and many others. Great and fascinating stories. Ultimately, I am running because I do feel that there's need to be a change in the City Council within the system.
Let me ask you specifically, are there particular issues in your ward that have driven you to run, or is it more citywide issues?
There's some very specific one to my ward, and obviously the citywide issues. Basically, when it comes to the reasons why I'm running, I really want transparency in the City Council. That's first and foremost things. I would like to see some term limits. That's why really one of the main reasons why I'm challenging Councillor Peter Demong on that. But when it comes to more specific issues that are on my mind, ultimately would be the something that's happening right now in our community would be the green space issue. We are in, with the calls for densification in the city that I've encountered personally, we are in danger of losing green spaces, smaller green spaces and open areas in the city. So that's one of the things that I would like to propose as changes to some of those policies to make sure that we keep some of the parks and green areas for people to enjoy with the densification.
Is there anything in Ward 14 that would be at risk with the densification policy?
Well, we do have a small area that the city is planning to allow a new community in. I think it's called Chaparral Meadows right now. So it's something that we've been working with the city administration and through community association that I'm a director on. We've been trying to have a conversation with really no avail.
What would you like to see happen? I imagine you've been following the change in the Community Development Act as it's been going through City Council. What's your perspective on that? Are they getting the right balance, or do you have a problem with the approach that they're proposing to take?
We do have a problem with the approach they're trying to take. Even though that we understand that city needs to densify, we cannot just sprawl out indefinitely. But there has to be a balance between living space, the density, and the green space. Ultimately, Storm Pond will not replace a playground. A parking lot will not replace some green space with benches for people to gather on. And that's something that on top of mind, especially with this guidebook coming up. I do see plans like that for the future in Calgary, because we do need to have a basic plan. We do need to have some collaborative ideas. But the way it is, the way they're pushing it through, I think it's becoming more of a political issue than actually issue of densification or making Calgary better.
How should the balance work between those who want to have more affordable housing and more multifamily development and more densification versus the established community that have traditionally been R1? How do you solve some of those problems?
Well, first of all, we need to be a little more open with the residents. That's something that, again, we've encountered with Chaparral Meadows. Communication between the city administration, the city itself, and the residents really been a one-sided thing. Basically, they will come in, they will tell you what they're going to do, they ask for your opinion, they check the boxes, and then they leave, and they go ahead with whatever they decide to do. And that's one of my biggest issues personally.
Tell me what you think the issue of affordable housing is. What is the problem that you think the city's trying to solve?
That's a great question.
Well, let
the
me
way
ask it more specifically. I mean, do
Yeah.
you think it's an issue of poverty, or do you think it's an issue of affordability for young families just starting out? Like, where do you think the problem is? Do we need more single-family homes, or do we need to have more multi-residential families?
Again, it's the question of balance. We do need some multifamily homes for younger families starting out to buy a new the new place, the first home, the first apartment. I think we absolutely have to do that, but at the same time, we cannot just change the zoning laws and say, you know what, anybody can just build 4-story building right next to a family that's been living there for 40 years without asking them, without taking their opinion into consideration. But yes, absolutely, we do need affordable housing. We do need to look at low-income families. But again, balance is everything, and open communication with the residents.
So I know that red tape and reducing red tape is one of your issues. If you talk to those who try to build new communities or build new homes, they would say it's really difficult to get their proposals navigated through city council. And so how would you balance that? Because I recognize that you're saying that zoning is important and public consultation is important, but how do you then also do that and streamline the process so that projects can get approved?
Another great question, Danielle. That's a multi-step process. Again, it all should start with the city planning and city administration. I'm sure they're doing a great job of looking at projects and working with the developers on their proposals. But at the same time, again, I think and kind of going back to the communication, because that's what I've been dealing with over the last 2 years. It's going back to the open planning. So everybody has an input on that. And it's not necessarily red tape on the city part, because I've noticed that a lot of projects get rubber stamped when they go to the council. It's more of a issue of everybody being ready to discuss everything in one sitting instead of prolonging it for 6 months to a year.
That makes sense. You've touched on something important, I think, which is the relationship between the council member and administration. How do you think that's working right now? And then we'll get into how you think it could be improved.
Well, in my opinion, looking from the outside, I think that the council should set the direction, and the administration should come up with a way of getting there, of following that direction. What I have seen over the last couple of years, again, from personal experience, is administration really sets the tone and directs the conversation, drives the narrative, and then it goes to the council ready to go, and councilors just vote yeah or nay. Unless you have a great opposition, what we have in March and in December about the Chaparral Meadows, then people will listen.
Well, then let's give me some idea as well about what you think the role of the council member is in guiding some of that, and maybe just judging from your previous experience. Have you had any previous experience in working on a board like this that you can bring some of that learning into the council?
In what sense?
What is your job experience that would qualify you to be able to give that oversight?
Okay, fair enough. Well, I work with small business, so I do know how things are supposed to work, especially with budgeting and a little bit of direction and management. On the other hand, I have spent last almost 7 years volunteering on a local community board, so I have learned how to work cohesively and amicably with other people, even when we're disagreeing. And when it comes to going hard into the council, ultimately, I think the job of the councillor, and I could be wrong, that's just my opinion, is to listen to the residents, to be support and the voice for the ward, for the residents, for communities on the council, and not just rubber stamper of decisions of administration.
Let's then talk about how that gets balanced with your colleagues on council, because as one board member, you would have to convince 7 of your colleagues to vote with you on a particular issue. Can you give an example of how you might do that, maybe from either from your past experience or how you might want to tackle a future issue?
When it comes to those things, that's another great question. I like to ask questions. That's one thing that I do, and I know sometimes I ask silly questions, sometimes I ask very smart questions. But I think the role of the person on the board or on a council really is to ask questions, ask tough questions, ask right questions, to make sure that people understand what the motives, the reasons, the outcomes, the consequences of a certain decision.
Do you think that the tone on council is the right one? Does it concern you at all, or do you just look at that kind of rough and tumble as part of politics?
Oh, I think it's I don't want to use the word laughable looking from the outside, but there's definitely polarization that I don't think should exist on a council. I think there's ideology I think comes to mind. That's one of my I don't want to say talking points, but I guess it would be, is that there's really no room for ideology on a city council, because you're not representing a party, you're not representing a party leader, you're representing the community, and that's what you have to base your decision on, not not based on a disagreement with other people.
All right. Well, let's then try to get an understanding a little bit about how you would approach some of the issues at City Hall. What do you think the core job of council is? They often weigh in on a whole range of issues that sometimes might be better left to the provincial level of government or the federal level of government. Do you think that that's appropriate for a big city type of council, or do you think that there is a core business that they've been neglecting?
Whew, that's another fantastic question. When it comes to that specific issue, I think the role of the council is the foremost, first and foremost, is look after the communities and the people that they represent. I understand people may have an opinion on, something that has to do with the province or federal issues. Everybody will have an opinion, but I don't think we need to use those opinions in making decisions that may or may not benefit the city. I think that's, again, totally different thing. I know from personal experience talking to people looking at politics, in my opinion, a little bit in a wrong way. People always pay attention to federal politics, then they kind of pay attention to provincial politics, and then municipal, it just kind of coasts under without people discussing it too much. And I think we need to turn that around. We need to bring municipal politics or municipal issues in kind of on the forefront of everybody's understanding. Lost the word there, sorry.
No problem. Well, let's then talk about the relationship with the province if we could, because often a lot of the conflicts I've observed happening between the province and the city come down to issues of financing. So let's talk some finance issues. Do you think the city has enough revenue to take care of its business, or do you think it needs to increase its revenue?
From personal research, I have learned that we spend way too much. So our problem is not the lack of income. I think it's the problem of spending. I think Alberta municipalities are on the top of the list when it comes to municipal spending per capita, and that's something that needs to be changed. I think we need to go back to properly budgeting stuff, zero-based budget. We need to go back to looking at income first and then coming up with a spending versus trying to figure out, what we need and then try to come up with the income. I think that's where the issue of increased taxes coming up is that sometimes we don't know how much money we even need before we get to the point of income. So that's one of the first things that I would like to tackle is the issue of spending.
Let's talk about taxes, because I know that there have always been a number of proposals, particularly in the context of talking about city charters, that would allow for Calgary to have new taxation powers. Are there any new taxation powers you would advocate for?
No, absolutely not. Not at first, obviously. Again, let's figure out the spending. Let's figure out how we can save money before we start looking for new ways to make money and upset people. Because ultimately, any new tax is, something that I will have to pay. So obviously, we want to minimize that.
All right. As you know, the city collects taxes on behalf of the province. It's called an education property tax, even though it just goes into general revenues. But what has happened in prior years is that sometimes the province doesn't requisition as much as the city expects. But rather than give that money and have it flow through to taxpayers, they assume it as new additional revenue. And you probably read Rick Bell's columns. He always makes sure to point out when this occurs. What's your basic approach and your basic strategy? If the province created some tax room, do you think it should go to taxpayers, or do you think it should be used for the priorities of the city?
Ultimately, anything that we don't need should stay with the taxpayers. That's kind of my base of understanding on that. That we do not collect any more than we have to, than we need. We've got a lot of reserves. That's kind of the way I look at it.
What do you think should be done with the reserves? I mean, do you think they're all legitimate, or do you think some of them need to have a different policy approach to them? What's your sense of it?
Oh, another great question. With the reserves, I think we need to look at what we need, because I understand it's good to have money. It's good to have, sitting on a pile of cash every once in a while, but we need to look at long-term spending, short-term spending, the plans for those reserves, and see if we need them. See if we can what's the word I'm looking for? Reappropriate them, relocate them to be it support small, medium, large businesses during pandemic, to lower taxes, to do a tax refund. I'm sure we can come up with ways of doing things.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the tax split, because that's also been a topic of great conversation over the last number of years. Some of the council members have advocated for a tax shift, so to balance out the amount that businesses pay versus residents pay. Do you support that move?
Yes and no. Ultimately, I think I did some research on that. Businesses pay about 3.75 times more than residents for a similar type of property, similar type of space. Again, let's go back to spending. Let's go back to basics. Let's come up with a budget. Let's figure out all the money that we have that we don't need. Mm-hmm. And then, yes, I understand that we need to decrease that gap, but do we decrease it by increasing the residential property taxes, or do we have room to decrease the business tax?
All right, let's talk. You do want to keep spending under control. You talked about zero-based budgeting. Do you have some idea of where you would be able to reduce spending so that you could avoid increasing taxes?
Well, that's going to be a very tough conversation. Just from me looking at the budget, just under 50% of city budget is wages. Ultimately, mm-hmm. We need to look at that, and I will not advocate for forced layoffs. I will not advocate for 20-25% decrease in pay. But that's something that we do need to look at. Do we need to shift? Do we need to put pay freeze? Do we need to come up with a plan of come up with a plan of lowering the pay base ultimately? Because we all hear about high salaries in administration management, in the management level of different city services. That's something that I've been kind of mulling over, is creating a little 2x4 plan that I would like to ask every department in city administration over the next 4 years, every year, to either lower the costs by 2% or increase efficiency by 2%. Which in the end would leave us with about 8% benefits in the long run.
All right. You talked about salaries and how you might approach that. What about the issue of of pensions and benefits. I'll say particularly pensions, because the city still maintains defined benefit pension plans, not only for their workforce, but also for council members. I'll talk about council in a minute. Whereas the private sector has switched over the years to defined contribution. Is that something that you think the city should do?
Yeah, we can definitely take a look at that. I would like to go into a model, like a private business model of our RSP contribution, more than a specifically pension. We definitely don't need 3 pensions. We definitely don't need, hardly even need 2 pensions. 1 pension is enough. But maybe we need to look at doing matching contributions to RSP plans.
What about the city council? Do you think that there needs to be some leadership in changing the way council is paid?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure we all heard Mr. Jeremy Farkas talking about it for the last 5 years. Absolutely, we need to bring. My goal is to bring the salary in municipal departments closer to the actually private sector, because I know that municipal salaries have been increasing over the last 5 years, where average Alberta income decreased by 5 or 6% over the last 5 years. So it's, again, something to take a look at.
Okay, another big ticket item for cities is always infrastructure. So let me just list off a few of the major capital projects: the Event Center, the BMO Center expansion, the Arts Commons transformation, and the Foothills Fieldhouse. So when the city voted to approve these projects, they did that against the advice of their CFO. The CFO didn't think they could do all 4. So give me your sense of it. Do you think there's a way to do all 4 of those projects, or do you think there's a couple that either need to drop off or be elevated?
I don't know if we can do all 4 of them with the help of the city. I would really like to see more private investments in it. I know there's been a talk about tax-free municipal bonds. That is something that I would like to take a look at. I would like to explore. Honestly, I have not looked into those specific items too close on those bonds. But ultimately, when it comes to BMO expansion and the arena, I think we need to look at more of a private investments versus the tax-based investments, because even though everybody will pay taxes to pay for those projects, I don't think not everybody will be able to benefit from those.
Okay, so more private sector investment in the Event Center and the BMO expansion. What about the Arts Commons?
To be honest, I have not looked at that specific situation too close.
No problem. What about the Foothills Fieldhouse?
Again, I think that's. I bet we can do it, but not this year. Next year, maybe even 2023, when we can actually look at the budgets and say, you know what, we can spend, $100 million. We can give that to them over the next 3 years, and let's build it. But I don't think it should be done this year or maybe even next year. Okay,
let's talk then about another big ticket item, the Green Line, originally envisioned as a 3-part or 3-party investment, federal, provincial, and local, supposed to be twice as long as it was, and was supposed to be half as much as it turns out it's going to be. So do you approve of the current vision for how the Green Line is going to be expanded?
No, I don't. And it's, talking to residents here in Ward 14, it's really a 50-50 split personally. Mm-hmm. But once somebody brings up alternative of scrapping the Green Line for now and maybe looking at actually connecting our airport to the rest of the city, that is something that even I would use. Being a salesperson going on short sales trips, I would like to keep my car in the house and take a T-train and not worry about the parking. That's something that I really would like to take a look at. But if the residents in Ward 14 would like to have, or in the city of Calgary would like to have Green Line, let's look at some alternatives. Personally, I've been doing some research on catenary free rail, basically the rail without the overhead wire infrastructure. So that's something that we can look at and look at the possibility of investment in that.
All right. Well, let's talk about the economy, because as you've seen, the business model for the city has been to rely on a large amount of revenue coming from a full, active, and vibrant downtown. When I spoke recently with Mary Moran from Calgary Economic Development, there's so much vacancy now that we could have 100 to 140,000 employees get recruited to come here to fill all that vacant space. That's a big problem. What do you think needs to be done about it?
And you know what? Coming from sales, I see this, especially downtown. My industry has been decimated this year, food and beverage industry. So I see that firsthand, talking to people, talking to businesses downtown, even outside downtown. But yes, we do need to plan on revitalizing it. We need to bring people back downtown. I know there's some councillors propose plans to do that. Yeah, it's tough.
Well, let me ask you a couple things then.
Yeah.
Is your approach generally one where you would like to offer particular subsidies or incentives the way they have in the past, or do you want to offer lower tax rates, or do you want to do something altogether different?
I think it should be more of a combination, really. We need to bring not even businesses, but we need to bring people downtown to bring businesses in to serve those people, be it with property tax reduction, with a business tax reduction, with subsidies. I think it's a multifaceted, that should be a multifaceted approach. I don't think there's a clear answer or clear direction that we need to take. I think it's an issue that will be solved by everybody.
So to be clear, they did set aside $100 million to be used to attract businesses. Do you support that approach?
Yes.
Okay, let's go through a couple of I hope I can do rapid fire questions to you so we can get a few more topics off. Wow, did snow removal ever become a big topic this year? Is that something that you've been hearing from in your community? And do you have any thoughts on how it can be improved?
Oh yes, absolutely. Snow removal has been fantastic this year. But things that I'm hearing, that the biggest problem with the lack of snow removal on residential streets right away is not even people getting stuck on the driveway. It's the first responders. I have heard a couple comments that it took an ambulance 15 minutes to get out of the neighborhood with a patient. And that's something that we really need to look at, not as these people want their streets cleaned. It's no, we need to provide the service. We need to be prepared for an emergency service regardless. And going back to budget and unnecessary spendings, I have witnessed snowplows coming through my neighborhood on bare pavement this winter. So there should be some common sense involved in that as well, that we may not need to run snowplows on when we don't need to run snowplows. But yes, I honestly believe that we can provide snow clearing services to people without increasing taxes.
All right. You mentioned first responders. You probably, so I'll ask you a few questions on that front. You probably have seen that the city's been in a bit of a scrap with the province over EMS dispatch and maintaining that. Do you have a position on it?
I honestly do not have any specific positions on that.
Okay. We also have heard a move to, they call it defund the police, but it's allocating a certain portion of the police budget to other alternative service delivery providers, social workers and mental health and addiction. Do you support that approach?
No, I am against defunding police, or whatever you want to call it, moving any money out of the police budget. I don't think that's responsible at all. There's a possibility of moving money within the police budget to allow for more frontline officers, to allow for more people on the street, for more police presence. Absolutely, talking to people in the communities. That's what people want. They do not want to defund the police. There may be a reform that is needed within the police budget itself, but taking money from the police is irresponsible, in my opinion.
Let's talk about fire. One of the things that we heard about the reluctance to approve new communities is not being able to build and staff new fire halls. Is that is that a prudent approach, the right approach, or is there a better way or a different way that you would propose looking at how you provide necessary fire services to new communities?
That's something you don't think every day about. But one of the things that I have heard is that we need to start looking not at building separate fire halls, but putting them together with multi-purpose buildings that will help subsidize those services. It's, again, something that I've been kind of talking to a few people in the city, and I think we actually have a plan down south to do that from the city administration. I think that will help a little bit, but ultimately, if we cannot staff a new community with a fire hall, we maybe need to look at the need for that community.
Okay, let's talk about garbage collection. One of the councillors has put forward a pilot project proposal to allow for some privatization of garbage collection. Do you support that?
It's something that we definitely need to look at. There has been a conversation on all services in Calgary about trying to see if we can privatize some of them, like golf courses and a couple other things, some rec centers. I don't know if garbage it should be one of them, but we definitely need to look at the whole structure of the bin system. We need to see what improvements. We need to look at maybe different models of doing or reusing the garbage. Maybe go with something that they do in Scandinavian countries and actually use it to produce energy.
All right. Let's talk about a couple more things. There were two proposals for referenda. One is going forward on fluoride. The other one did not. They made the decision to drop speed limits to 40 kilometers per hour in those residential areas. If you had been on council, would you have supported that decision, or would you have put it to a referendum?
Interesting question. I would definitely try to put it to a referendum, but if the council wanted to make a decision, they should have made a decision on both. Taking speed limits into the council's hands was almost like they did not trust the public to make the right decision. Mm-hmm. And with the fluoride, I think they're pushing their decision out of their own own hands.
So generally, do you not approve of referenda, or are you saying if you're going to do it for one, you should have done it for both?
Yes, if you're going for a referendum, then put both of them on there. Don't keep one and let the other one go.
All right. What about public art? Do you think that tax dollars should go to support public art? There's been a lot of controversy around public art in the past number of years because of projects that didn't seem to really make sense. I think people talk about the blue ring. They talk about the towers on the highway that are even hard to see, expensive. Is this the right approach to take?
No, I mean, I love art. I love different structures and, these art pieces everywhere. One major change that I want to do is to take it completely local. We need to promote, if we're spending our money, Calgary's money, we need to make sure that it's a Calgary artist, Calgary sculptor. We spend the money locally. That's one thing that I think that we all should support. If city's spending my money, I would like to support a local guy.
Okay, we got it. We covered a lot of ground. Let me just put one last question to you. Yep. If you had a situation where you felt that the best interests of your ward might be in conflict with what was the best interests of the city as a whole, what would you do?
I wondered about that, but I think the first thing that I would do would actually consult with the ward, with the community associations, just to see what their take on. Again, it's going back to my call for transparency. I would, in this case, I would rather ask for permission than for forgiveness, if that makes sense.
All right, and we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time today. I sure appreciate it.
Well, no, thank you very much for having me. I hope I didn't rumble too much.
You got it. That's Anton Ovtchinnikov. I hope I've said that right. Did I do a better job this time, Anton?
Yeah, no.
Beautiful. You might have to do one of those videos that Mayor Naheed Nenshi did where he taught people how to pronounce the name. But Anton is our candidate for Ward 14. And stay with us. We'll be back.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.